Okay, but not yet, right?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Pete. I'm from Green Apple Books. I'm pleased to introduce to you Bonnie Tsui, who lives right across the bay from me, although we end up in the same waters sometimes. She's written a fantastic new book called Why We Swim. We are also working on getting Susan Casey, author of Devil's Teeth, The Wave, and a bunch of other books, to join us. And so I'm going to hand it over to Bonnie, who can tell you a little bit about the book, where it came from, et cetera. And in the meanwhile, I'm gonna maybe disappear and see if I can get Susan in. Welcome, everybody, and thanks, Bonnie, for doing this.
Hi, everyone. I am going to do a little song and dance right now while we wait and try to get Susan on. Due to technical difficulties, she is getting the spinning wheel of death, but I will soldier on. This is the book we speak of, Why We Swim, and thanks so much for being here. I have been really just so moved by the response to this book, and I've been really excited about the prospect of talking with Susan Casey about just the life aquatic and sort of what it means to be a swimmer and a water person now, you know, in these strange and tumultuous times. And certainly Pete and the rest of us Bay Area swimmers have been trying to get into the Bay as much as we can as a sort of daily tonic, you know, as a bulwark against all that is happening. And I know that for a lot of you out there now, that swimming is a thing that, you know, if you can get out into the wild waters, that has been something that is, you know, helping us to get through these really troubled times. I recently have been doing a lot of thinking, and certainly it's weird to be talking about this book now again, like, you know, shows like the double, sort of the double swords of just like all these things that are happening with pandemic, but also protests for social justice. And I've had reason to think about, you know, swimming, especially as something that for me has always been the great equalizer, in that the water is welcomes all of us and buoys us all in the same way. And for me, I found freedom from, actually this is a pretty weird thing to think about, because in the book I write about growing up on Long Island and how in a pretty white town that swimming on a swim team in the next town over, which was a much more racially diverse town, being in a pool with Black and brown bodies and just feeling that comfort, feeling having the opportunity to find a tribe that welcomed me, and you know, in that pool, in that space, I felt that was a place for me, that people didn't make fun of my last name or, you know, sort of push up the edges of their eyes when they saw me. That never happened in the pool. That never happened in my team. And I, you know, last week, my town, Merrick, Long Island, was trending on Twitter because of the protests that were moving through Long Island. And then there were counter protests by white supremacists, sort of racist people lining the street. And there was this ugly side, this sort of memory. I remember talking to a lot of my my friends growing up on Long Island. We were all pretty rare people of color in our schools, and that seeing those faces shouting back into the cameras reminded us of, it took us right back to being in junior high. And it was like this really crazy and painful moment of recognizing, you know, that those ugly currents, those social currents still exist. And around swimming, I remembered feeling like I could escape from that by going to my swim team, by going into a place where other people looked like me. And
you have a chapter in the book on sort of historical exclusions of African Americans from pools and all that, right?
Right. It's about, well, it's a funny thing, because in that section of the book, it's about community, right? It's about how you find your tribe. And then historically, in this country, we have kept people apart. We have kept people away from swimming, away from pool access and swimming education because of our fears of racial mixing, of mixing in water for race, for gender. So it was a real eye-opener to explore that history, that sort of background tapestry, to understanding why there is this racial gap in swimming education, swimming ability that persists. And it's because of segregation, it's because of racism, it's because of all of these many decades of policies and segregation in America. Because, you know, it's interesting because you think about what is it that makes us swimmers and what is it that makes some of us not? And in many places, it's money, right? So it's economic. Like, do you have access? Do you have time? Do you have access to a pool? Do you have access to teachers? You know, what is it that you need time? It's a luxury. And so how much of that luxury is afforded to all of us in a society? And in the United States, unfortunately, that's been so loaded by not just the income, but also the race aspect that has really haunted swimming, you know, in this country.
Yeah. And so you travel, there's a number of different locations that the book tells stories in. I think you start in Iceland with a hell of a story. Yeah. Can you give a quick version of that guy's insane experience?
Sure. I mean, you know, I wanted to tell stories in this book, survival stories of all kinds, right? So the story that I was telling you about my personal experience is a survival of a sort. It's how I sort of came to find comfort in my body in this world as a young person. And of course, there's also survival stories of like actual survival, you know, life or death situations where, and the opening story of the book is one that I wanted to, it's about this Icelandic fisherman who in 1984, his fishing vessel capsizes in the North Atlantic, and everyone perishes except for him. And he swims 6 hours in freezing water, 41-degree water, to safety. And it is only possible because his body resembles that of a seal. So his body fat was like, 2 to 3 times normal human thickness, and more solid. And it turns out that kept his core temperature stable enough to keep swimming. He was also a very good swimmer. He was a sailor. And in Iceland, you know, in navigation school, it's like you're taught very, it is part of the culture of Iceland that you're a very good swimmer. You know, you're taught these swimming skills. And he was also, because he went to navigation school. And the combination of those two things, that he comes from this like culture of resilience and of water and of surviving the water, but also lots of lives lost at sea, merged with his like very extraordinary body composition. It was like, those two things meeting are, you know, they were to me so fascinating because it was a reminder that we're not so far removed from the sea. And that was the sort of magic, and that was the sort of anchor and that feeling that I wanted to get at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, so and if I remember right, they don't recreate the actual swim, but people do mark the day somehow with a ritual swim. Is that right?
They do. They mark that every year in March. They hold something called Gudlugsund, and it's Gudluger's swim. Okay. And so they swim the distance that he swam, which is 6 kilometers. In a pool. And it was started as something that they did on the all the sailors in the navigation school did it, and then it became something that like people joined in because they wanted to honor him, and they wanted to honor what he was able to do, and they wanted to honor the history, the lives lost at sea. And then it became something that kind of like spread around Iceland and then also abroad. So it's really this wonderful, I mean, I talk about it in the book, like, it's sort of like, you know, Thanksgiving turkey trots or 4th of July fun runs, except just,
Okay.
just really particular to a community and, you know, honoring a person and honoring resilience and perseverance and just what we can do, what's possible, I guess.
Yeah, I mentioned it because I know there's a lot of probably South End swimmers and dolphin swimmers watching today, and they're always looking for, you know, the next crazy swim to do. There's a question from somebody that says, in your recent New York Times article, you seem to link swimming with walking in nature, Thoreau, Einstein, etc. Could you please talk about the link between swimming, walking, and mindfulness? I'm a swimmer and often feel like a dolphin in the water. Apologies to the South Enders.
Sure. You know, what we have always said about thinking and walking, right? So taking walks and kind of stimulating thought. I just thought, what about swimming and thinking? What about swimming and writers? Because I noticed that the language that we often, with which we often describe walking and thinking and our thoughts is, it betrays us, because it was talking about like the swim of things or the flow of our thoughts and how, you know, it's like a fish, like Virginia Woolf would describe like thought like fish, you know, swimming, and so many people did too. And I thought, you know, this is, you know, to be in the medium is to encourage a very particular kind of thinking too. And just the movement, and it's the same kind of thing as being in motion when you're walking, that when your body is moving, you know, you kind of get into this, it's something that I think that Wallace J. Nichols calls like a soft fascination, like what he's talking specifically about water, but when you are, you know, just moving through nature, that you're kind of noticing things, you're noticing, like the flicker of the light in the trees, or the light in the water, or the fish around you, and you're kind of conscious of paying attention to something, but it's holding your attention, but not too completely that you can't then sort of detach yourself from the things that you're normally thinking about, and then that sort of leads to this creative lane of thought.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, it's literal immersion in nature. You are literally immersed in nature, obviously not in a pool necessarily, but where we swim in the bay or in the ocean, there's that. And then, you know, meditation is breathing, right? And yeah, when I swim, all I think about really, besides my terrible form and what somebody would tell me to fix, is breathing. And there's something, you know, meditative about just thinking about the breath.
Right. That the breath, you know, when we take it, in swimming, the nature of the thing is that you take a deep breath, you hold it, and then you let it out slowly. And if you think about it, that's so much about meditation, is noticing your breath, slowing it down, holding it, and that sort of like triggers the whole like parasympathetic, you know, nervous system. And I'm sure a lot of the people here are reading James Nestor's new book, Breath, which has a lot to do with how, yeah, it's just a great book, and I had the privilege of reading it early, but I just remember reading it and thinking, this is so much about why swimming is so beneficial to us from a meditative perspective, from a mindfulness perspective, from a also relaxation and calm perspective, you know, and throw into that like being in nature, and then all of it is just like this perfect storm of you know, calm and restorative time, I think, with yourself.
Right. So some of the other places the book took you, I remember specifically reading about samurais training to swim vertically while wearing armor. It's kind of blew my mind that they have some sort of water polo kick going on where they can, like,
like 30 pounds of armor. Yes, yeah. Yes. Imagine that.
Did you master that? Have you tried that yet?
I haven't tried it, at least not with the armor, but I did discover this incredible tradition called Nihon Eho, which is Japanese classical swimming, which is basically the Japanese swimming martial art. Think about it like that. Okay. And if you kind of trace it back, think about in the Japanese feudal period, all of these different parcels of land in Japan had to be protected by different samurai clans. And so, depending on where those parcels of land were they ocean facing, were they facing rivers, were they on lakes, it seems completely logical that these different clans would have develop different swimming techniques to protect those pieces of land from invaders. And so they, if there was a clan that was protecting against open ocean, that they developed certain strokes for like cutting through waves and like sighting the enemy, or very quiet waters to kind of like tread water, like you were describing with your false suit of armor on, that you could be submerged up to your eyes and very carefully and barely disrupting the surface, be treading your way across the water. And I just thought this is fascinating. And then there's video of now that there are still practitioners of Nihone, the different schools of swimming, where you every year there's competitions of people who can fire arrows while treading water, and remember the arrows, the feathers have to be dry, to hit to fly true and hit the targets, or that they can use their swords and fight while treading water, or that they can leap out of the water with just their legs to get into a boat. And it's amazing. And so what relevance that has to today, when we're not fighting, is that actually some of these techniques actually are ones that Navy SEALs have shown up in their training. So that's super interesting. So it started as a martial art, right? So something can be a martial art, has been for many, many years. And but a lot of these techniques, a lot of these strokes can be then, if you think about how different martial arts cultivate character, right? Cultivate strength of mind and just patience and bravery and all that. It's the same thing for this swimming martial art, that certain moves were thought to cultivate patience or benevolence or strength and all that. So I was also amazed to learn that these traditions were the foundation of a lot of the Japanese national team's training success in the early 20th century, like when they first started to compete in the Olympics on the national stage with swimming races, that a lot of these techniques and strokes were adapted to be part of the training. And so actually in the Olympics, in the Tokyo Olympics this summer, supposedly, there was going to be an exhibition of samurai swimming. So I'm hoping that happens next summer, because I really would love to see it come to the world stage, because people have not actually seen this happen. They're not really familiar with it. Yeah.
Another question somebody asked, Eva, why did Ms. Tsui state in a recent interview that the racial discrimination in US swimming began, quote, mid-century? Why is she whitewashing the far longer anti-Black violence in US swimming, as everyone from Professor Kevin Dawson to Andrew Carl to Jeff Wiltz have documented it's a much longer history? Thanks. Do you know anything?
I think, I don't know to what Eva refers to. I may have misspoken in a recent interview by saying it began mid-century. I certainly didn't mean that. And in the chapter of my book in which I talk about the sort of long history of racism and segregation in the United States, with particular reference to swimming, I talk about how it begins in the early 20th century, after public bathing facilities, public pools started to be transitioned from public bathing facilities to places of leisure. And so that's sort of where that discrimination started creeping into public pool policies and who's allowed in, and that sort of very insidious creep of segregation that resulted in Blacks not getting the access not getting the education that sort of crept in. And so in the book, I talk about this in the section of the book on Who Gets to Swim and community. And I certainly reference Jeff Wilt's book, Contested Waters. And in the book, in my book, Why We Swim, I wanted to address these, the racial history of swimming in America and sort of like the question of access. But Jeff Wilt does it much more comprehensively in his book because that's what his book is about.
So you'd recommend that to people who are interested in the topic?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a really great book. And I hope that people pick it up now because it's the perfect time to do that.
Excellent. Another question from Linda, and for those watching, if you haven't yet noticed, there is a Q&A button near the bottom. We're sorry Susan Casey isn't here yet. I'm sure she is already feeling bad enough, but we'll make her feel plenty bad later, right?
She
Linda,
says she's been trying it on her laptop. It's still not working.
Oh, no. I feel for her. We're all just kind of adjusting and trying to figure this out as we go. Linda asked.
Oh, wait, she's here. Hi,
Susan. You see her? I can't.
She wrote a note in the comments.
Oh,
we miss you.
Oh, she's here in a way. Okay, so maybe through this weird chat thing, we can ask her questions. Okay. Susan, if you want to ask a question to Bonnie, I'm going to stall with one more from Linda here in the Q&A, and then maybe Susan can throw one at you. So Linda asks, do you have experience with cold water swimming? Research showing how beneficial this is. I'm from Northern England, and when I swim in the North Sea, there's a tremendous nature to letting go to the cold, which takes you to euphoria. I don't know if our water qualifies as cold for a North Sea swimmer or not.
I know. I was going to say, Pete, that you have a lot more open water, cold water swimming experience than I do. But yes, here in the Bay, I mean, right now it's like, what, 62? So that's balmy to you guys. I have had experience with cold water swimming to a limited extent in this book. And of course, interview a lot of folks who, like Kim Chambers and Lynn Cox, who have experienced many more cold and crazy waters than I have. But I do dive into the research and the science about what happens to our bodies in cold water quite a bit. And that was really interesting to find out, which is that that we have, our metabolism speeds up like 300% in cold water, and that our dopamine goes up also similar amounts, just that there is a feeling of euphoria that results from that now that if you think about sort of what happens to us. And certainly in the short term, like it causes our blood pressure to go up. There she is. Hooray! Is her sound with us? Okay.
I think so. Susan, can we hear you? Say something. Susan, can you say something? So we can see if we can hear you or not?
I think you have to unmute.
Let me see if I can do that.
You might be able to unmute her.
I don't think I can, but Susan, in the bottom left corner, it should say unmute. Oh, no, now you're muted. Oh, there we go. Oh. Sorry, people. There we go. Susan,
there
you should be able to talk. Yay!
I saw the whole thing. I just couldn't figure out how to get on camera here. So sorry.
Welcome. I'm going to hide, and you guys talk.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. Thank you.
You were a great stand-in.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Did you swim today?
I went surfing today. So does that count? I don't know if it counts.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I think any immersion counts. But I am planning another Keller Beach swim tomorrow morning for any of you out in the audience who are possibly here and want to join me. Susan, I know that you are in New York right now and haven't really been swimming since you've been there. How have you been feeling?
horrible. I mean, it was so interesting. Something that you wrote, I think it might have been in that editorial in the New York Times when you said, who was it? Somebody said, if you can't get into a body of water, then at least get into a bathtub or something like that.
Yes.
That's my aquatic regimen lately, and it's not enough. But I am leaving soon to go to Hawaii, so hopefully that will I'll be able to make up for, I guess now 2 months of not swimming. I think it's the longest time I've gone in years not swimming, actually.
Yeah.
It's not good for anything. Yeah. When you were talking earlier about people saying that walking is so meditative, I was laughing because I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a terrestrial bias in the world. And I often and I think people act as if land is the only game in town, and in fact it's a very, very small percentage of the planet. I mean, the planet is 99% or 98% saltwater by volume. Land is a sideshow here, and I often wonder why. And it must be just because there's not as many people swimming as there are walking, I guess.
And we are very anthropocentric as we know, and so it's where we are that we tend to care about.
Some of us,
for better or worse, right? Yeah. Yes, but not you and I, clearly.
Well, probably not anybody who's on this call either. It's have you ever noticed that there's kind of an aquatic tribe? I mean, I certainly know a lot of them, and I'm always excited when I meet one. I mean, I'm super excited to meet you.
Yeah, I know. I know we've said this already, but I really wish that it happened in person, and I look forward to that day and it's going to be in the water too. Maybe in Hawaii. I think.
Yeah, I remember reading an editorial that you wrote in the New York Times about swimming over by Ala Moana in that sheltered area, which is just a fabulous, fantastic place to swim. And I was always a little bit jealous of Oahu that we didn't have a place like that on Maui, because typically when I swim open water on Maui, I can't go by myself. And I've kind of learned the hard way not to go by myself. So, if I can't find somebody else to swim with, I'm stuck to the pool.
Where in Maui is your favorite place to swim open water?
Well, we swim, my group, and anybody is welcome to join on Maui on Sundays at around 8:45 a.m. You'll know the people by the pink swim caps. Gathers over in Wailea. Gosh, I don't even know the actual name of the beach, but it's where the old Maui Prince Hotel used to be. It just got torn down to make condos, but it's like the last beach before Big Beach and Little Beach. And we swim along there, and that route was chosen long before I showed up. And it was chosen specifically because it goes over a number of really beautiful reefs. It goes through some rocks, some lava tubes, and then around to this very beautiful sort of white sand expanse. So it's like a little bit of everything. And I just love that swim. It's just fabulous. And we see absolutely everything there. We've seen it, you name it. I've seen it out there.
I love to kind of think about the difference between pool and open water swimming, because I know that a lot of people land on one side or the other, but I actually really feel that, for me at least, that both are necessary, because in a pool, there is this, it's circumscribed, where the walls are, where the lanes are. And in that respect, there is a letting go, an autopilot that you can go into that allows, a certain kind of thinking to happen, a certain looseness. And I think that with open water, which is so special, right? So there are all those things to look at, and an attentiveness, a presentness that I think is really very acute and also super valuable in this time. But it's not that you can go on autopilot, unless, even if you're in Ala Moana, you're still kind of like looking around, you're still noticing, the fish swimming by, or the surfers going out, or the wind, or something like that. And I just think for me at least, both of those kinds of swimming flavors, you know, I like both of them. And I'm curious if you do too.
Oh yeah, I mean, my whole background was swimming in the pool. I mean, I have never found it boring, and I don't think any swimmer would ever say it is. It is. I like the clock. I think that's something that's really important. Just to sort of give yourself a bit, you know, go for a bit of a spin and see what you can do. You know, it's the turns are always something that I really enjoy. Yeah, in fact, open water swimming came to me really late in life. I was quite nervous about it. For a very long time, I was really scared of fish. And it took me quite some time. In fact, I think it was actually, I only really got to be less scared of fish after hanging out with great white sharks for a while, because after that, I was scared of fish.
Yeah, it's like it's a whole continuum, you know, great whites, you know, nurse sharks over here.
No, now I'm really excited when I see a shark. You know, there's nothing, what I'm scared of now in the ocean is a box jellyfish. But other than that, yeah. So where's your favorite place to swim?
Oh boy. So I really do love Ala Moana, because it is like this, it's like a downtown ocean swimming pool in Honolulu.
Yeah.
I just think that that's so crazy, and it's so of the place, and I love swimming there because you can see the surfers going out, you can see the reef, and then you can see the people getting married on the beach, you know, you can see the buildings, and the water is just so beautiful, and it feels safe as much as open water can feel safe and calm. Right. And just like this, I think anyone who loves swimming loves that just expansive feeling that, you know, that the horizon and the water, and just that you can go out for, you're not sure how far you can go out. But I also really love Tunnels Beach in Kauai.
Yeah.
Because I like the wildness. I like the yeah, I like that you can see sharks. Actually, I remember that piece that you talked about at the time. I talked about how I was there with my kids, and in the reef shallows there was this like bloody juvenile shark that then the lifeguard came and like yanked the shark out of the water, and it died in the reef. But you know, everyone then kind of congregated and looked at it, and I wasn't sure what kind of shark it was, but just, you know, it's a good reminder of what's out there, you know, that sharks are there.
There's a lot of things, especially, you know, Kauai has always struck me as I see Kauai on the wall behind you there. Is that the,
actually, no, that's Big Sur, but it does look a lot like that.
It kind of looks like that, like the North Shore.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Sorry, what were we saying there? What was
we were talking about just like seeing animals and in the water and sort of wildlife.
Yeah. Kauai has always struck me as the wildest of the wild of all the Hawaiian islands. And
I love, and it's, you know, it's like it's got a lot packed in a very small, you know. You mentioned to me, and if you want to talk about this you can, but I wanted to ask you what is this adventure you're about to go on, because you said you're going on a research.
Well, I'm going on a big dive, and with the typical writer superstition, a lot of things could derail this, so I'm really hesitant to specifics about the weather could derail it, but it is certainly the most extreme thing I'll have ever done. If the ocean gods are
saying something, Susan, that's saying something. I've read many of your books.
I'm pretty excited, but you know, I don't mean to be coy. It's just, you know how it is when you're, you know, I don't want to come out and say that I'm going to do something and then I end up, because if it doesn't happen, I will not be writing about it, because I've always felt, I don't know how you feel about this, that I don't think it's fair to the reader to talk about the adventure that didn't happen. It's just, why do it? you know, but
Yeah.
so far so good. Knock on wood.
Okay, I'm knocking on the wood here.
I
just wanted to, when you mentioned it in our notes to each other the last week or so, and I just thought, I want to ask her if she feels like she can talk about it. But just everyone then just knows that you're going on an adventure, another adventure that we may hear about sometime.
Oh yeah, you're gonna, you know, if it happens, it will be, it's just very deep, very deep. That's what I'll say. I'm going very deep.
I'm going to dip into some of the questions here. Rosie asks, what animals you've seen in Maui and any whale encounters? Ooh, yes, whale encounters. Whales are pretty incredible to see when you're swimming, because of how you feel size-wise, just that you're so vulnerable. I've only seen whales when I'm surfing. I've never been swimming and seen them like anywhere beneath me or out. But I've only seen them when I've been on a surfboard, and they've been very close. Like sometimes they've breached right there. And actually, I just saw, this is pretty incredible. A friend of mine sent video of being at surfing in the Rockaways in New York, and there was a whale breach right in the lineup. I could not believe that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many whales on Maui. You may, or I mean, I have been in the water with them, and it's like a spaceship goes by. It's the most extraordinary thing. It is like such a trip. I've also been on a surfboard with a singer beneath me, and the whole board will vibrate. You know, they hang upside down when they're singing. Their tail is up, and it's so interesting because they don't know much about that song and what it's doing. Only males do it. They don't exactly know why certain males, but only about 10% of the males do it. And of course, that song is shared by all the humpbacks around the world, despite the fact that they kind of have their own little regional riffs on it, and they don't know in some cases how they're actually, I mean, it's filled with mystery. And so that was a pretty extraordinary thing. But you know what you can do all the time in Maui in the winter is you go into the water and just hang out underneath the surface, and you can hear them singing like really loud.
Wow.
So many of them that you can hear it from anywhere on the island.
I have to, the next time I get to Maui, I'm looking you up.
And there are a lot of them. Actually, I wish right now is a great time. Unfortunately, nobody can be there, but you know, it's empty, and there were a lot of whales this spring. So
yeah, I mean, it has been amazing to. I think everyone has seen some evidence of this shift of wildlife being more wild, being more visible in you know, the built environment, sort of at the fringes of where we overlap with them when we don't necessarily pay attention when we're so busy in our daily lives. That in this pandemic period, that they have just been out and about. And actually, now that there has been more activity, people are, you know, certain places are starting to reopen, and there's more, you know, cars, for example, in the streets, that then you're not, you know, I would go out and see in the morning and just see deer everywhere, like all over town. And I feel that I hope that we sort of remember to pay attention to that as things kind of evolve, you know, now. I mean, certainly in the water, I think that one of the great things about swimming in open water, of course, is that you do take the time to notice these things. We are in contact with fish and you know, seals and sea lions and sharks and dolphins, and that they are out there all the time, and that we actually get to meet them on a regular basis. And part of the regular practice of swimming in open water is that you get to have that. And I think, at least for me, it's a reminder of like my place in the universe. And I think that now in this time, that is more than ever so important to remember, you know, as we are sort of arrested, you know, in this moment, to understand, you know, why we are and how that happens, and that we're part of a bigger ecosystem of just life on this planet. And like we were saying, that, you know, we are very centered as a species, we're very centered on ourselves.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything, this is constantly a theme I write about, because I don't think there's anything that will put you in your place faster than a big wave, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's no arrogant big wave surfers. There's, you know, you want to tell the ocean that you're in charge, you're going to get set straight pretty quick. And that could also be why our very unhumble species tends to cling to land a little bit more, because there is no mistaking who's in charge out there.
Mm-hmm.
As my friend Laird Hamilton says, you know, there's no puffy chests out at these big wave spots.
Yeah, if you puff your chest out there at Mavericks, you're gonna get knocked over right onto it.
Yeah, somebody you think I'm the man, you know, bam.
Let's see, I wanted to make sure that we answered questions. Joshua says, thank you for reading. What advice do you have for a somewhat out of shape person who hasn't swum competitively in 20 plus years but wants to get into open water and distance swimming? You know, I think, I mean, now is your time because all the pools are closed. You know, try to venture into open waters, depending on where you are. Sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, one of the things I think is so underutilized for people who may not be that confident, or maybe they're trying to fix their stroke, is the first thing I do is tell the person to put fins on. Because especially, first of all, especially if you're in open water, and especially if you're in the ocean, because if you get into any sort of current or anything like that, you know, you can flip on your back, you have more power. But for people whose hips drop, which is a kind of a typical thing, right? The fins will help the body plane, and then they feel more comfortable breathing and things like that. And it's always, you know, it's always a good idea.
Yeah, I think fins, you know, actually I have friends, a lot of friends now who have been to-date pool swimmers, and then only in this pandemic period have they started venturing out into the bay because it's what's available to us. And so they've got fins, they've got buoys, right? So just to feel secure and also be visible, right? And then most people have wetsuits, which gives you a little bit more buoyancy. And so, you know, get a good wetsuit. You know, depending on how cold you get a good, you know, you can get a neoprene cap to wear underneath your regular swim cap. And just like kind of try it out. Try, like, you know, little by little, like swim 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And you will start to feel comfortable, like sort of an out and back, depending on, again, on where you are. And I just feel like all of the, you know, swim with a buddy. I think that's always a really good piece of advice from the start, that you kind of start to get comfortable noticing and knowing the environment that you're in. And here I just have been seeing so many swimmers for the first time really experiencing open water, and it's, you know, it's thrilling. I mean, you get to see a whole new perspective on the bay here that you don't normally have, and you can see the bridges. It's really so beautiful, and it is, you know, like we were talking about earlier, that you get this sense of expansiveness that you wouldn't necessarily get in a pool. And just seeing that first thing in the morning just does something for me that is so valuable. And oh my gosh, right now is just, you know, it is priceless, you know, to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a time, and I don't think this is just me either at all, when I haven't felt better when I got out of the water than when I went in it. In fact, it doesn't matter what body water it is, but you know, lakes, oceans, they're magnificent. They just make you feel happy. So, you know, big advice I would have would be just do it. Do it. Just make sure don't be daunted. Don't be daunted. Stay near the shore. You know, at first. And,
I have seen, you know, here especially, that there are, you know, there's plenty of spaces to be swimming close to shore, particularly during low tide. I mean, just kind of like suss out the conditions, and then you'll be braver, and then you'll keep going further, and thus it starts. So I wish you great luck, Joshua, on your swimming, your new open water swimming career. What else? Let's see here. What is the most exquisite body of water or pool that you've ever had the pleasure of swimming in? So we've talked about places in Hawaii. What about pools, Susan?
There's a pool in Santa Barbara that is to die for. It's you can't always get in there if you don't. It's a membership club. It's called Coral Casino. It is incredible. It is a 50-meter pool, spectacular, always empty, on the ocean. And it's a friend of mine is a member there who lives in Santa Barbara, so I've had the pleasure of swimming in that pool, and I tell you, that is just like heaven as a swimming pool. How about you?
Let's see, pools. I mean, I really love the Hearst pool here at the Berkeley campus. It is a Julia Morgan pool, and it's like that black marble, you know, that weird 33-meter, I think it's a 33-meter pool, you know, it's just, I have heard this, and I don't know if anyone else has too, but that 33 meters was a normal, because it was like 100 feet, I guess, like that was like a standard at that time, like to have these pools, because I was very curious about why it was 33 meters or 33 yards. Anyway, it is right in the middle of the UC Berkeley campus, and it's just beautiful. But I also find it like also terrible to swim in because you can't see the wall. You're swimming at it and it just hits you because you can't see it. So that's not good, but it is gorgeous. And so if you're not really swimming laps and don't mind swimming into the black hole, it's fine. Pool-wise, sorry, go ahead.
I love dark tiled pools. They're just hauntingly beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. There's also a pool that's really cool in Vancouver. I lived in Vancouver for a while after university, and it is at Kitsilano Point, and it's about 150 meters long. It only open during the summer, but it's cool because it's so long.
Yeah, the Kitsilano pool, I've heard of that. Also, have you swum in any of the pools in Hong Kong on top of the skyscrapers? Because that's pretty crazy too.
No, back when magazines had money, I worked at Time Inc. and they sent me to Hong Kong for 3 months. I think it was in 2000, and I fell madly in love with the place. I did not want to leave, but unfortunately, I did not get any swimming time when I was there. And I haven't been back since. And God, it is just a fantastic place. And I bet it has some killer pools.
My parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong, as you know. And my dad, he grew up skin diving in Hong Kong, like in the harbor, like with his dad. And, there's pictures of him just like spearfishing out there. And I just think about, I just love to think about it as this pretty, wild, undeveloped place that didn't look like the way we think of it now with all these skyscrapers, that it was this, subtropical, this place where you could be snorkeling all the time. We think about it as such an urban built environment. And I don't know, I just love to think about that period of time, and I look at it with like a great nostalgia, but it's an interesting way to look at an urban environment now. I think that so many of these places, like if you just know where to look, that they're hidden, that you can experience the wildness that's hidden there.
I have been, this is Venice with, I've always thought it would be just exquisite to swim through the canals, but people tell me that, and I'm married to an Italian man, he tells me that is not a good idea, that swimming in the Venice canals is not something people do. But given the fact that now, I think if I was going to do it, I'd probably have to go pretty soon.
Well, yeah, you've seen that now that the canals are deliciously clear, right? That they've seen fish for the first time in decades.
Well, I used to have a dream when I was a kid that instead of walking places, people could swim to places. And I still think that would be really cool. that's the only place I could think of where you could actually do it. But as I said, I haven't been there, and I think it probably would, I'd be a little disappointed when I saw the water, unless it was right now, which apparently is clear now.
I just saw a question from Melissa that, do you have any advice or cautions about pollution in swimming in San Francisco Bay? There are water quality reports that you can see that are updated pretty regularly at different spots around San Francisco Bay. So you can look at those depending on where you're going to swim. It's pretty easy to find. And okay. To answer Eva, I haven't read Dawson's Undercurrents of Power, but I will add that to my list. Thank you.
Hi, I've reappeared.
Hi, Pete.
We just have about 5 minutes left. Thank you both so much for the conversation. I want to say two things, or say one thing and ask a question. First, just a reminder to those of you here that the book is available for purchase. Of course, it's available at greenapplebooks.com. It's very prominent on the homepage, so it should be easy to get. Bonnie is stopping by the bookstore in a few days with a mask on to sign copies. So if you'd like a signed or inscribed copy, just note that in the comments field at checkout. You can probably buy the book at pretty much any other self-respecting, locally owned independent bookstore. Whether it's open or not, I'm sure they'll find a way to get you that book. And then maybe
we vote for Green Apple.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Thanks. Final question though, you can answer aquatically or otherwise. If there's any other book that either of you have read lately that you just are super enthusiastic about and want to make a pitch for. Susan, can I throw that one to you first?
Well, first let me say that I love Bonnie's book. I think it's just, of course I'm going to read almost any book about swimming, but it's rare that somebody with Bonnie's like ability to write poetically and yet also like have a really good time and take readers on a great narrative journey. It writes a book about sweat. I mean, it's just, for me, it was like a confluence of all the things I like. So I loved that book and I highly recommend it. I have had a copy of The Overstory for a couple of years and I just read it and it blew me out of my socks. It just absolutely, he's a master. And he writes about trees. The way he writes about trees is just divine. And also, like Bonnie, is great at both literary writing and combining that with real narrative momentum. So I really like that book. I love that book.
What about you, Bonnie?
Now I know that we're on the same wavelength because I just got The Overstory and I've been meaning to read it, and it's, I just got it and sitting on my desk and I'm really excited. I also just got A Burning by Megha Majumdar. And I've been so excited to read that novel. I mostly read fiction these days, and I'm just really excited to dive into that one.
Well, that's a great segue, and it's as if you had planned that, because we're doing an event with her, I think, on Wednesday. So check back at greenapplebooks.com if you want to see that author and hear more about that book. It's fantastic. My wife read it and hasn't stopped talking about it for about 2 months. So thank you, Bonnie and Susan. Susan, I'm sorry that it took us so long to figure out how to see you.
My problem. It's worked every other time, but I'm very sorry to be late.
Technology. I'm so glad that you made it through, that we figured this out. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure. Real pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Pichu. Hopefully I'll see you in the water somewhere at some point.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.